Welcome to the Ingleside Reviews, Innovators Unveiled. We're thrilled to take you on a monthly journey into the minds behind the most cutting-edge products hitting the market today. From the coolest gadgets lighting up your Instagram feeds to groundbreaking services revolutionizing our daily lives, we're here to spotlight the innovations and, more importantly, the innovators. So gear up for an energetic and informative ride as we delve deep into the stories, the challenges, and the triumphs of the creative geniuses shaping our future. This is Ingleside Reviews, Innovators Unveiled. And now your host, A.D. Edwards.
Welcome back to another episode of Ingleside Reviews, Innovators Unveiled. Today's conversation is for anyone who's ever thought, can I really build something big in technology outside of Silicon Valley? The answer is yes, and our guest has proved it. Dan Ward, co-founder and president of Detroit Labs, turned a vision for building people-first apps into a nationally recognized tech company. From helping revitalize Detroit's entrepreneurial scene to earning partnerships with global giants like Google Cloud, Dan has walked the path from idea to impact. In this episode, you'll discover how to thrive as an innovator no matter where you're starting from, and what it really takes to grow a culture of creativity, and how to design technology that doesn't just work, but also changes lives. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I appreciate the intro. It's far better than I could have done.
Oh. Well, it's all about you, so it's a great intro, and you've done some great things. And technology is ever changing. I have a friend who is in IT, and we were just laughing because he says, this is the only field that I know that I constantly have to do continuing education because everything changes in 3 or 4 years. And I say, yes, that's true. And because of that, you have to stay on top of a lot of things. So I know your life is like that.
Yeah, well, and I also feel like AI is both the blessing and the curse when it comes to that. Obviously, that's what has rapidly changed everything. At the same time, that's what a lot of people can use to stay up on everything that's happening. I find myself constantly using it as research, as helping me make sure that I'm staying up on, specific trends, or comparing specific products, services, things like that. We were just using it today for research. So I feel like that's one of those things, stay up on it, but then also it's incredibly helpful to help you stay up on things.
Yeah, that's true. And we're going to talk a lot about technology, but first I want to get a little bit into your background so the audience can get a feel for who you are and how you started. Dan, where are you from?
I'm from Michigan, so I like to say Detroit, Michigan, but realistically, I grew up about 60 miles north of that. I lived just outside of Detroit, but lived downtown Detroit for a couple years.
Okay. What early experience would you say shaped your view of entrepreneurship and innovation? Were you thinking entrepreneurship as a kid, or were you one of those kids who wanted to be a police officer or fireman, some job, or did you want to have your own business?
I'm pretty sure I wanted to play in the NHL at some point in time. I grew up playing hockey, so I think that was probably my first goal. And then I think later on, as I started to go through college, I started to realize that technology was something I had a passion in. I didn't growing up, but my brother actually was more into that. Like I said, I was primarily into sports at the time. And then when I ended up going to college, I started to tinker with computers. I got a job at IT help desk. That's really where I started to find and hone my passion for technology. I had a lot of really great leaders there that enabled me to do some of that. And I think that tinkering and that exploration there is what gave me the passion for technology. But I'll be honest with you, I had no idea, no plans to start a company. That was not where I thought I was going to go.
So when you were at this company working at help desk, I just know I've called into help desk, and they tackle a lot of different issues. Is this what gave you a broad feel of what technology would be, the different issues that you were facing?
Yeah, so I worked for the help desk I went to Central Michigan University, and I worked at the help desk at Central Michigan University. And I found that it gave me access to a broad set of problems, but also uh, I learned how to communicate with folks that were potentially frustrated with the challenges they were having on their end, right? Big or small, it didn't matter. Whatever it was for them, it felt big, right? And so it gave me an opportunity to really kind of hone those skills of passion for technology with ability to communicate and then having to walk them through, if you imagine you call a help desk and they're like, oh, you have to click here, click here, click here. Well, they need to be able to visualize it without seeing your screen. They need to be able to help you
Yes.
figure that
Yes.
out. And so I learned a lot through that to the point where I kind of tell a lot of folks, if you want to get into technology, IT help desk is a great spot to start.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And you just made a good point. I haven't thought about it in that way. When you're working a help desk or customer service, rarely would someone call in, "Hey, you're doing great." Most times they call in with a problem, so they're kind of upset. So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, it was frustrating. We always had a fun fact was this was always challenging. We were told never reset a student's password for a parent and never, oh, we had no access to the actual student's passwords, but the parents would call in and say, I need my child's password. Okay, well, we can't do that. I need you to reset my child's password. Okay, can't do that. And they're
Right.
like, I pay the bill. I'm like, that's a fair point.
Okay.
So I'd love to do
That's yeah. Yep. They call that all kind of privacy invasions if we do that.
that.
What how did Detroit Labs come to an exist into existence and
Yeah.
what was the spark?
Sure. So after I left Central Michigan University, I got a job at Quicken Loans. Now they're Rocket, but they were Quicken Loans at the time. And
That's another Dan Gilbert, right?
yes, and I actually started working directly for him. About 3 months
Okay.
in, I started to work directly for Dan. And so I found myself for about 3.5 years traveling everywhere with Dan, sitting in on meetings with Dan. I'm a big basketball fan, so got to meet all the players, Cavs, sit in on meetings with David Stern and Adam Silver at the time. Just really
Oh,
soaked up, like a buddy of mine said, just be a sponge. So I was a
yes.
sponge around Dan. I soaked up a lot of what he did, how he approached situations, the questions he would ask. And I think working with Dan, I started to see I'll call it power of being your own boss, if you will, right? But
Mhm.
the power to create.
The
And
freedom.
yes, that's a great way of putting it. Exactly. And so as I worked with him for a while, I think I just kind of stumbled into Detroit Labs. I know everyone wants
Okay.
a big bang, big spark type story. But in a lot of ways, I stumbled into it. I had a relationship with a couple folks that we were kind of noodling on this idea of a software services company. I mean, that's not necessarily innovative, but like we saw a need a little bit. It pitched the idea, it didn't go anywhere, but the folks that we pitched it to said, "Hey, listen, we see value in the idea. We don't see value in the way you're presenting it because we presented it very small." And they were
Okay.
like, "We think it could be big. And can I introduce you to a couple other co-founders that we think would be a benefit for you to get to know?" And so I ended up meeting, there's three other co-founders, four of us total at the time. And we were all just kind of put together. We were all introduced to
Mhm.
each other. And that's how we started Detroit Labs. So it was one of those things where, like I said, it was probably a stumble more than anything. And I think it was, to draw back on did you always want to be an entrepreneur thing? I just saw this outlet and I was like, this looks cool. And that's as much as I thought about it. And then even like I remember talking to my mom and she's like, "Whoa, you're gonna leave a good paying job with stability. You're gonna go start this company." And I never thought of it like that. I just went, "Well, no, I'm just gonna go do this thing. If it doesn't work, I'll just go get another job. Or I'll go back to working for Dan." You know what I mean? So
That's interesting because that's what scares a lot of people, and they say, "Oh, I have stability," but do you really? Because if you rely on someone, anything can happen. So it's not total. I mean, we get what you're saying. It's a constant check, but anything can happen at any time. So might as well take advantage of your life and do the things you want to do. Now, you say you guys just stumbled into it, but my friends always say that when it comes to success or luck, it's just preparation crossing opportunity. So you were prepared, you had the opportunity, and there you got success. So that's a good thing. Now, when you guys started in the early days, what were some of the biggest challenges that you all face building the company?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the first one is clients, right? So we're a technology services company. So we exchange dollars for hours is the best, most simplest way I can explain it. We work with very large brands to kind of solve their challenges with technology, design, build solutions. A lot of times that's mobile apps, websites, and so very very early on, um, how fast can you get clients? And as a services company, how fast can you make money? Because the expectation of a services company is different than a product company. Product company, you can burn cash, and that's expected because you're trying to get something to market. Services company, it's how fast can you get to cash flow positive? Because that is what can then dictate your growth. And so I think early on, I mean, again, so many just early stories of pitches going well, pitches gone wrong. I mean, the very first pitch that we did, we met each other in the lobby, some of us for the first time, and it was a disaster. We ended up recovering. We got the client. That was great, but that first pitch was just awful. So you step back and you go, should we be doing this? Right? Like that was like that very first friction point or challenge that we had. But yeah, early on with a services company, it's how fast can you get clients? And then when those clients are done, do you have another one lined up? Because
Right.
otherwise you're sitting there not making money.
Yeah, and we can't do that. So I had I I think a few episodes back there was another gentleman that was on the show, Mario Kelly. He's from Detroit too. One thing I know about Detroit is it's a city with resilience.
Mhm.
Detroit's been through a lot. How has the city itself influenced your approach as a founder?
Yeah, I used to use this term when we started the business, and you probably could say it's a little cliche, but I still think it fits. Um, we come from a culture of blue collar in Detroit, right? Like everything
Yes.
that we know growing up is shaped around the big three. We all had a parent, grandparent, aunt, uncle, whatever that worked at one of the automakers. And whether they were in upper management, whether they were on the line, it doesn't matter. There's just this natural blue collar work ethic grit that comes with the big three, and it comes with Detroit. And so, you know, I talked to folks very early on that I call it blue water or I'm sorry, blue collar tech, right? Like
Blue collar
it's
tech.
this work ethic that really comes with folks into the technology space. And I think what I started to realize very early on was nobody was really too good for a job, right? No one was like, oh, that's below me, or I'm not going to do that. So starting a business with a lot of folks that are from whether it be actual downtown Detroit or the Metro Detroit area, which around here is miles and miles away, but it doesn't matter. Everyone was just willing to constantly roll up their sleeves, right, and take on challenges that
Yes.
might feel like beneath you at times, might feel challenging, or like, hey, I've been doing software for 15 years. I'm not going to go do that little thing. Never experienced that. And so we always called it just blue collar software, blue collar technology, blue collar work ethic.
I like that. I like that. What mindset shifts did you personally and your partners have to make when you all moved from idea to execution? Because I know one you mentioned the idea you had, the first group of people said, "You're thinking small, we could go bigger." Were there any other shifts that you all had to make?
Yeah, I can obviously only talk personally for myself, but I think you spend when you're in the idea stage, you spend a lot of time thinking like, what could this company be? What could my environment be? Who would I surround myself? Like, what might my website look like? Like, what might, all these different things. I think you visualize probably something that is already in existence. right? It's an aspirational view of a business that already exists. I think a lot of people do that when they're thinking about it. And I think that makes people look past all the work that actually needs to be done that's not fun early on. And I think that mind shift is when you get past I think the romanticized view of starting up a company and you move into the hard work, which is picking up the phone and calling a potential client, which is showing up somewhere for a pitch, which is like, I mean, if you don't have clients spending money with you, you don't have a business. You just have a group of
Right.
folks that like to hang out. Right. So like, I think that's the biggest thing is when you move out of that ideation phase into the execution, it's calling up a client, it's showing up and talking to somebody, it's pitching your idea, honing that pitch, communicating. And I mean, sales rules all when it comes to a business.
That's true. I'm going to ask you a question that's a two-part question.
All right.
But if the first question is affirmative, the last part of the question is irrelevant. Can you share a moment where you almost gave up? And if so, what pulled you through?
Good question. I probably could talk about a lot of different scenarios. I mean, early on, I could talk about probably two very impactful ones for me personally.
Okay.
Early on, we were really excited because we got this really great deal with Chevrolet. We were going to do an application for the Super Bowl. It was the 2012 Super Bowl. Really exciting. A lot of press, won awards for it. It had commercials, all these other different things. We were of the mindset at the time that we're going to have an application that is so big, so great. Everyone's going to hear about it. Everyone's, of course, going to want the developers that created this app, right? And we won't have to sell. They'll come to us. This will be it'll be a sales tool. It'll be a marketing tool. And so we had a very tight deadline. We only had 15 people at the company or 14, whatever it was. We positioned everyone all in on building this solution to get ready for the Super Bowl. It was great. It happened in like 2.5 months. Remarkable. Got done. Launched it. Great. Everyone, takes a breather. And we sat there and we're like, what do we do now? Because we don't have any sales. No one was working the phones. No one was pitching clients because we were so focused on the thing that was in front of us. And we were so convinced that once that thing went out there, we wouldn't have to sell again. People would come to us.
Wow.
So that was, naive, obviously. Borderline arrogant, one might say. And I think we sat there and we looked at each other and we're like, that was really messed up on our part. Like we should have been selling. And so we had a lean month or two early on. A lean month early on is really scary.
That's scary. That's very scary.
Now you have them okay, but lean month early on, very scary. And that was one of those points where it was like I can only speak for myself. I felt dumb. Right. And I felt like,
it's a learning experience,
Yeah.
It's a learning
really
experience.
Dumb. Like I should have known better. But now I know.
So you mentioned there were two. Can you recall what the second one was?
Yeah. The second one was right on the backside of COVID. When we shifted home to COVID, from COVID, that wasn't a big deal. We had kind of always been a remote friendly company. All that, other than the world that we lived in was challenging, but like running the business and whatnot, not overly challenging.
Right.
We were still doing really well. We had a couple great clients that were still investing. We had moments there where we're like, oh my goodness, our client's going to go away. What are we going to do? And so that part went well. And then on the backside of that, probably 2021, going into 2022, we had the great resignation, right? Everyone was moving and leaving and going for more money and everything. And rightfully so. If it's there, go chase it. But we were finding ourselves losing a lot of really great talent during that time. And that was tough. That was really, really, really tough because, a couple of ways. A, you just don't want to lose great people that produce amazing things. That's one. Sure. As a business owner, you don't want to have that happen. But like you're losing great people. too.
Right.
You're losing great human beings, and you're losing human beings that you feel like, wait, I thought we were in this together. I thought you were going to stick around. I'm not mad at you because you're getting a lot more money and it's life changing for your family. You should do
I wish you the best, but it's still a blow.
exactly. And so it's exactly what it is. I mean, we had team members coming to us and they're like, "Hey, I'm getting offered, X amount more. Like, what should I do?" And we're like, you should take it. But,
Yeah.
like, that was painful. That was really hard because I think that felt like a rejection of your idea in a lot of ways. Like, no, I don't want to be at Detroit Labs anymore. And I felt like we were in a position where we couldn't do much about it because a lot of these offers were coming from West Coast companies, and it was cheap
Mhm.
for them to offer jobs here because the cost of living's low here. They were allowing people to work remote still. Great gig for somebody that's in Detroit to get West Coast dollars. So
Yes.
I think that one, there was a lot of nights there where, I'd go to sleep going, man, this stings. I expected
Yeah.
a lot of things. This one I did not expect. And that one, I think it probably hurt pride and feelings more than anything.
So how did you get through that? Did you recruit more or
Well, I think the first thing, a couple different things happened. I think the first thing was probably more like, interpersonal. It's how do you bring yourself to try to solve that problem? And I think the first thing is you do feel like a failure in that moment. And there are a lot of times during that where you're just like, I cut out for this. I don't know if I want to deal with this. These weren't the challenges I thought we would have. This one stings personally. So like, I kind of, do I feel like giving up, quitting?
the voices in your head, right?
It's tough. And I remember, and this way of doing things still sticks with me. I remember telling myself, I was laying in bed, about to fall asleep, and I was really frustrated, upset. And I remember saying, all right, well, listen, let's break this down. I've got really two options. I can give up. I can just say, you know what, I'm done. Like, hey guys, I'm out. You run the company without me. I'm gonna take off and do something else. But that is an option.
That's one option.
Right. And so the other option is if I'm not going to take that one, what am I going to do about it? So if I'm not going to take the out, if I'm not going to take option one and quit and leave, what am I going to do about it? And at that point, I think it's healthy to do that because you're essentially saying, I've already decided that giving up is not what I'm going to do. So I can't just exist in the middle. So I got to go do this other thing. And,
Mhm.
and, I think we have a really great team, and we sat down and we had to start prioritizing certain folks. We had to do everything we could to give more money out. We did a big across the board adjustment in comp. That was very, very difficult to do. I think it was meaningful for team members, and yet still we were in a tough spot, right? Like we were never going to be able to give them the money Facebook's giving them, right?
Yeah, but you're going in the right direction though.
Right. Well, and it's also a gesture of we understand what's going on in the market. We're not just sticking our heads in the sand. We're doing everything we can to do this right. And so that was the part of it. There's a couple other things I feel like we did just, focus more on engagement. We wanted to emphasize the fact that at Detroit Labs, we're still an incredibly flexible place. As long as you get your work done, you're doing what you committed to, you're going to come and go as you please. And even in a digital world,
You can't always put a price tag on flexibility.
yeah. And we
And
did exactly. And we did a good job, I think, at that point of telling ourselves, hey, it's not just about the money, and we have to really do a better job of highlighting where there are other values at Detroit Labs. That flexibility is one of them. Our benefits are phenomenal, and we're lucky because we have investment from Dan, and so we get to take part in that big umbrella of benefits that he has been able to negotiate. So our folks are getting these benefits that a company of our size has no business offering.
right.
Uh,
So that's
so
great.
I think that's beneficial. But that was definitely a time where it felt like, you know, time to give
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. Yep. And you push through it. Now, you said something about the West Coast. And Dan, it seems like in my conversations with people in the tech industry, sometimes they feel they have to go to Silicon Valley to make it work. What do you say about that?
I think I'm from Detroit, and I think what everyone wants me to say is absolutely no way, and you got to do it here. But I think there's pros and cons to both. Honestly, I think one of the things you do get in Silicon Valley is, you get the network. It's why people go to Harvard or University of Michigan, right? Like, no matter how well you do there, you walk away with a really great network of folks that you know.
Yes.
And I do believe when you're in Silicon Valley, you get that. Like, you go to the bar, you might meet 3 other founders that are at the bar. You go to an event, you're going to meet 5 other folks at an event that are doing the same thing. So you have that density of entrepreneurship there that you're not going to have in Detroit. But that density is a drawback too. So now you're going out, you're meeting these folks, and you're going to start your business. Now you're competing with Google, Meta, Apple, like all the same area. You're competing for the very best talent. How are you going to compete with them?
That's
Unless you
true.
convince somebody to leave Apple and give them a ridiculous amount of equity, right? Like, how are you going to compete with them? And when you are in a Detroit, or insert any other Midwest city that's similar to us, there's competition, certainly, but you might be the new guy in town. You might have a fresh new idea that's interesting. So a lot of these really great technology folks that might be working at automakers or utilities or whatever, they're looking at this going, wow, that's a new fresh idea. Like, I'm ready to make a jump. So you can attract talent a lot better. And I believe you attract talent that they stay at companies longer. And
Okay.
Silicon Valley, it's like a little badge when you have X Apple, X Google. I mean, you see it all over LinkedIn, right? Like,
Yes.
and so that's kind of like a game, right? It's a badge of honor that they have there, and we don't really have that here. That at
Yeah.
least that I've experienced.
Well, you mentioned that, you're a smaller company, and I know when you have a smaller company, you have to have a certain type of culture. So what's been your guiding principle in building company culture at Detroit Labs?
Well, the first thing I recommend is a co-founder that understands how to build culture, and how to build a technology group. Nathan Hughes is one of our co-founders, and he's previously been a VP of technology, and he's been a driving force behind the culture that we have at Detroit Labs. But it's all kind of under this one big umbrella of, we wanted to create a place, an environment that we would like to work at, that we would like to go to.
Yes.
I'm not a great employee, right? I worked well for Dan because it was, him and I and his crew. And so it was smaller type, but if you put me in a big company, I'd probably get fired in a couple months. Paul, one of our other co-founders, and Nathan included, none of us are good employees. So, we wanted to create a space where folks like us could still do really well and flourish. That's
Now, I've seen your space. I love the exposed brick loft and the spacey rooms, and it seems like I just put it this way. I would like to work. I was like, I wouldn't mind working in that space.
yeah.
Does that you think that was that part of was that by design?
Yeah, I mean, so we built the space ourselves. So we worked with a architecture group, Kramer, in Detroit, and we helped to design that space. That was an old Lane Bryant department store that had
Really?
holes in the actual floor, and like, I mean, it was bad. And so we worked with Kramer to design that, build that out. So it's very much our creation, and everyone that worked at the company at the time, this would have been 2013. So everyone that worked at the company at the time participated in design reviews. So when we'd have a new
Excellent.
sketch to show them, a new blueprint to show them, we'd do a meeting and we'd show it. Hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And so it, very much it was their process as well. The other thing we did, which I believe probably captures our culture maybe more than anything, we moved into this space and we didn't have it pre-decorated. So we had some things, but like the walls were bare. A lot of elements were like, our desks were just IKEA desks. We had really nice chairs. That was the one thing that we invested money in. But we had just barren walls, and what we wanted to do was allow the team to come in and make it their space. So
Mm-hmm.
when it came to building the desks, they're IKEA desks, they shipped unassembled. And so we
Mm-hmm.
had a desk building party. So on a Saturday, everyone came in early in the morning. We bought pizza, had beer later in the afternoon, and everyone built their desks. And we had this
Yes.
big assembly line of building desks, and that was great. So again, folks felt like they had some level of ownership over the space. And
Mm-hmm.
same with decorator,
Yeah.
things on the wall, pictures, everything, you name it. The team got a chance to do it, and that felt like they had ownership then.
And that's another thing that I believe helps retention, help you keep, when you talked about the tough times, when people feel like they're part of something, it's more attractive to them.
Yeah, I mean, I can still look back on pictures from that desk building, and we have people that are still at Detroit Labs from that desk building party.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean they're just blindly going to do that, right? But
Of course not. Of
it's,
course, but
they talk, you listen. You know what I mean?
yes, of course. And you want to, as an employee, you want to be heard. You want to feel like your contribution is appreciated, and things like that show appreciation. It goes a long way. How do you balance innovation with usability? Building tech that real people actually want to use, that's just not cool, but they actually here's a word my wife uses a lot: practical.
Yeah.
That's the actual practical technology.
Yeah, when we work with clients, that's a big thing we bring up very early on. So that starts with first understanding your customer or your client. I remember, great example. We work with Jimmy John's. So if you've ever ordered a sandwich with their mobile app or their website, that's
I have
that's our
quite a bit.
fantastic. Keep doing that. That helps us. But that is that is our work in partnership with them. And very early on, the testing that we were doing, you may have heard the term hallway testing, but uh, once we had designs and we prototyped the designs, we walked around our space out on the street, and we were simulating what it would be like to order a sandwich from Jimmy John's with one hand. Because that's
Really?
really, yeah, because if you think about it, if you're ordering Jimmy John's, you're going on with your day, and if you're going to do it on a mobile phone, that is likely not a sit down, full dive in type situation. You're probably,
Well, I feel bad because I'm at my desk when I order. And
well, the website can be everything you want it to be. but
Yeah.
early on with the mobile apps, because that's what we built first, we really focused in on, I think the average consumer, especially around lunch, they're moving from place to place in between meetings. A big chunk of Jimmy John's transactions, our lunch transactions, a lot of them are at businesses. And so we were like, okay, well, let's test what this is like moving from meeting to meeting. Can you do it one hand? That was a big thing that we wanted to do. And so that was, the menu can look as cool as you want. It can do all kinds of cool things and interesting things. But if you can't order it fast enough on one hand, what's the point? Right.
So you can actually order it on one, so that it's possible.
It was when we did it. I assume it still is. So, but when we built the original one back in 2013 or 4, no, it's got to be 14 or 15. Anyways, we've been working with them since. Like we
I'm gonna try it, Dan. I'm gonna try that. That's
hopefully I'm not wrong. But that was certainly the goal. And the other thing that I talk to clients about too, when we talk about knowing your customer and or your audience or user, if no one uses it, did you build it? Right? Like you spend $1 million. If no one uses it, like what's the matter? Was it the tree
Yeah.
falls in the forest, no one hears it type situation, right?
Exactly.
So you can spend millions and millions of dollars on a piece of technology. If no one's using it, it's pointless. Your idea was not
Yes.
good, right?
True.
If we do it, our idea is not good. But
Yeah.
that's a big piece of it. It has to be usable.
Now, as an entrepreneur, those who are aspiring entrepreneurs, they have to have a mindset. Failure is an opportunity to learn. All the great athletes, everyone that's accomplished things of merit had to have a mentality. What role has failure played in shaping your success?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think with failure, the first thing you have to do is allow yourself to accept the failure. I've met a lot of folks that when they fail, they don't even acknowledge it. They just keep moving on, and there's some level of value there, right? Just that's not being scared. That's all these other different things that are commendable. But I think once I learned to accept the fact that it was a failure,
Mhm.
accept the fact that it might have been my fault, right? Allow yourself
Yes.
to accept the fact that it might have been your fault. Then you can really start to process what happens. I think that very first reaction to failure is getting mad, frustrated, and it's someone else's
Yes.
problem, right? And it's natural. Human beings do that, right?
The human knee-jerk reaction.
Exactly. I deal with that with my 6-year-old every single day, and it's never his fault. So I think uh, once I learned, and I learned this, I don't even want to say early on. It took me probably a couple years. I learned that, you know what, some of these things might be my fault. And so I really need to sit back. If things are happening in the company, I have to at some point ask myself, did I do something wrong? And
Yeah.
once you do that, once you kind of let your guard get down, then I feel like you accept failure as a learning opportunity. Until then, it's someone else's fault and it's frustrating and it just builds and builds and builds. So I think that is a key piece because then you just
Yes.
allow yourself to learn from it.
I agree. Now, sometimes in the tech field, I can imagine do you guys come up with these ideas, but then when you might start working on it, you may have to change it a little bit. Can you talk about a time when listening to users caused you to completely change the direction that you guys were going in?
Yeah, so uh, we had a client and we were working on e-commerce. It was an e-commerce website, and it was actually something that was already built. We were working with them on refining it, tightening it up, reworking some of the flows because their biggest challenge was having transactions be smooth. They're just getting a lot of drop off in certain areas.
Mhm.
So we felt very strongly about a way of doing it. We put it in place and then started to watch the metrics, and it was not great. It was not
Mm.
what we thought, and it came from an educated opinion. I mean, we did the work. We felt very strongly that we had it, but there was a different part in the flow. So let's say if there's a 6-step process of buying a thing, right? They were having challenges at step 3. We
Okay.
ended up introducing a challenge at step 5. So we did great all the way up until then, and we had a challenge at step 5. Well, you can't go to a client and say, "Oh, but now it's better until step 5." Doesn't matter. They didn't, right? So
Right.
you get to step 6, it's irrelevant. So at that point, data helped us. And then you got to go back to a client and say, "Hey, we made this decision. We made it on this, this, and this. We feel like we missed the boat. We're going to make a small change, and we think that will make a difference." Uh, we're fortunate it did. And that's one example. It's not isolated to that though. When you're
And in the long run, the client appreciates it.
They like honesty. I mean,
Yeah, of course.
I think if you can have hard conversations with a client early and often, they're not comfortable, but it just makes it that much better. That way, when you come to
Yeah,
the table, you're not in self-preservation mode. You're in like, hey, your success is our success. We want to
it
actually
builds trust. Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
What does being recognized as a Google Cloud application development specialized partner, that's a lot of words, but what does it mean for Detroit Labs and your clients?
Yeah, I mean, I think having your name attached to one of the big companies is fantastic. We're certainly one of many that are certified Google Cloud partners. I think for us, just being able to have access to folks over at Google when we're building something, I think is really helpful, pretty amazing. I love the quick and easy conversations we can have around AI, specifically with their Gemini tools. I think that's incredibly powerful to have. So, with all these partnerships, I think the biggest thing that you get is access. So, I mean, you
Mhm.
could insert Microsoft, you could insert any other name other than Google, and you just get access. And being able to go
Access.
to a client and say, "Hey, I've seen the new Gemini," or "I've seen this," or "I know this is coming," that's
Yes.
really powerful.
How do you define innovation? When you think about it, you work in a world where tech changes daily.
Yeah.
So how would what how your I'm thinking innovation to us, you probably see things before they hit market by at least, I'm thinking 12 to 18 months.
I wish that was
What is your
the case, but yes.
Oh, that's not the case? I'm thinking when you guys are working on stuff, like, for example, this is why I say that. I could be wrong, but in order to sell products in the tech field, if I buy a laptop, it's gonna be outdated in, like, a year when they do the new one, so I'm thinking they're working on the next stuff already.
Yeah, I think I I view innovation as cumulative. So not just one big bang, if you will.
Mhm.
So when we talk to clients, it's about the small things that start to add up. It's about introducing Apple Pay rather than just having credit cards. Well, that's not revolutionary, but now you're speeding up the checkout process, right? So I
Yes.
view innovation, a tracker for an ordering situation, not revolutionary, but now you're speeding up or you're making that process that's that much more full, if you will. And so I very much, when I talk to clients, I say the same thing. I do truly believe that innovation is the cumulative approach. So it's all these small things that start to add up over time that
Okay.
create an innovative product. Um, Apple's legendary for that.
Mhm.
Google is great for coming out with big bang new features, right?
Yes.
And Apple just takes little things here and there from Google and they start to add it up over time and they create a really good cohesive product. Now you can say whether they're innovative or not, I don't know, but they have a cohesive product that works like
Yes.
90% of the time. So I kind of subscribe to that more than the Big Bang revolutionary, because I do believe that when you do Big Bang and revolutionary, I think you run into that trap of the practical versus flashiness. Like, will people actually use it?
Yeah.
Kind of want to like take a, hey, I know they use that. You're not using that. Let's get a piece of that into your
Mhm.
situation. And then over
Yeah.
time, now you've kind of changed the way people order things or do things.
True. Many entrepreneurs, they risk the chance of burning out by continuing to chase growth. How do you personally avoid that trap?
Yeah, uh, it's interesting. I think you have to first ask yourself what you want out of your company. Growth doesn't have to be the end game. It can be. If that's what you want, it can be. Prepare yourself for that because that is, like you said, that's stress. Um, that's not what we wanted per se. We wanted healthy growth, but we wanted responsible and sustainable growth because
Uh-huh.
like all of us saw companies in the past that would grow exponential overnight, right? And then your business doesn't always keep up with that level of growth. There's spikes, right? So if you build your business to the spike, you're in a challenge when that spike goes down. And so we did our very, very best of acknowledging what we wanted this business to be very early. And we wanted healthy, sustainable growth. We wanted growth. You need it. If you're not growing, you're dying. Right. So kind of a general statement in all business and life. So we wanted the growth. But we wanted to do it and still maintain this notion of a place we all wanted to work in. And I think oftentimes when you grow fast, the burnout happens because you've just created an environment that you really maybe didn't want.
That's interesting. I was reading an article. It was basically a review case study on Boston Market.
Mm.
They started out in the 80s just doing rotisserie chicken for families, and they were a hit. They were successful. Then they went corporate, or they IPO'd
Yep.
in '96, and they went up to 1,200 locations, but they had started adding meatloaf and turkey, and then they got to the point they were adding sandwiches. So now they compete with McDonald's. Now they're competing with the neighborhood that has grocer has the rotisserie, the Sam's Club, and they just lost their way. And they may have stayed in business if they stayed close to the core values that they started with. So now instead of having 1,200 stores, they have 16.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
that's
right.
chasing growth.
Yeah, I read that same article. Like they
That
just
was
completely
interesting.
diluted their entire brand.
Yes, chasing growth.
Yep. Yep.
What leadership lessons have you learned that everyday struggling entrepreneurs out in the audience need to hear? One or two?
Yeah, I think my big one is be honest and open. Look,
Mm-hmm.
and when you mess up, admit to your teammates, admit to your peers, I screwed that up, right? Or if you don't know something, just admit you don't know. Like we had an all company meeting the other day, and one of our team members asked a question, and no one had an answer for it, and I just said, you know what, you may not like this, but I don't know. So
Mm-hmm.
I just that's the best thing. I know you want an answer from me. You want a good one, but I don't know. So I think that and being vulnerable and willing to say that and being willing to let everyone know that you're a person, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that is that's a big one.
Yeah, I would agree. The episode that I did before the one I'm doing right here with you, we had Jim Penman, who started Jim's Group in Australia. He has over 5,500 franchises of this lawnmower care service. And I asked him, what's the most important thing? And he says, being honest. He said, you'll keep customers when you're honest.
Mhm.
You'll keep partners when you're honest. You'll keep clients when you're honest. And he agrees with you on that. So that's a good thing for the entrepreneurs to hear out there.
The other thing too is when you mess up and a client's mad at you, um, sometimes you just gotta take it. We have I won't go into who it was, but uh my other co-founder and I, we had a client that was not thrilled with us. They had reason to not be thrilled with us. It was warranted. And they wanted us to fly out to their location. And they didn't say anything about what the meeting was about. They just wanted us to
Uh-oh.
talk, right?
The principal's office.
Yes, exactly. And so we're on the way out there, and my buddy looks at me, he goes, what do you think is gonna happen? I go, oh, they're gonna yell at us. He goes, "You think so?" I go, "Oh, yeah." He goes, "What's our response?"
Definitely.
I go, "Absolutely nothing." I go, "We have to walk in there and take it. And as long as we do that and we take it respectfully and we hear them out and we acknowledge where we messed up, we'll end up like better off because of it, right? Like, you have those tense situations and you can get through it together, you're stronger. And
Right.
fortunately, that is what happened. We got yelled at. We took it and, we've been great ever since. So,
That's good advice.
yeah.
How do you evaluate which opportunities to pursue and which ones to walk away from?
Oh, we do that all the time. For us, so we do all onshore development. So we don't have any
Okay.
offshore development that takes place. So that means our salaries are onshore salaries. That means our bill rates need to be onshore bill rates. They're substantially higher than an offshore company. So we usually have the first metric of how much revenue does this potential client, how much do they have per year, right? It's usually a pretty good idea because if we're going to be a big expense for them relative to the amount of revenue that they have, that's probably setting both of us up for a bad situation. And so we tend to use that as kind of like that first like checkbox of what percentage would we be of theirs. My co-founder once told me, he said, hey, $1 million to a mom and pop down the street that does $10 million a year, that's everything to them. That's absolutely everything to them.
Yes.
So they're never going to spend that. $1 million to General Motors, I mean, they spend $1 million every second.
It's a drop in a bucket.
Exactly. And so for us, it's all about how we position ourselves in the market, who we go after. And usually you get a pretty good sense of if there's a fit. You want to make sure that they can afford us. They can afford us responsibly. That's where I say, General Motors can afford us responsibly. A startup that just got $5 million in seed funding cannot afford us responsibly. That's the big one. And then I think the other one is just how engaged and interested are they in doing this, right?
Okay.
Are they passionate like we are? Do they want to do this too? Is there a real problem we're trying to solve? I will say I hesitate to ever chase dollars. Now, when you're starting up, chase a few bucks. But I
Yeah. That's a
hesitate
different
to,
stage.
yeah, I hesitate to only chase dollars. I like to make sure that there's a good partner on the other end of that.
Mm. What's the difference between building an app? People say, "Oh, I got an app. I got an idea for an app." What's the difference between building an app for a company that already exists that does something else and they just need an app versus a building a business that's built around the app itself?
Yeah, I think the first thing is with the company that already exists, they have customers. They have
Okay.
entire teams that understands who their customers are, right? So if we're looking at General Motors, I'll keep using them as an example. They know who's buying the GMC Hummer EV. Like they know who's
Right.
buying that, right? Or they know who's buying the Blazer EV. Like that is all information they know. So if they wanted to build an app for that, they call you up and they're like, "Hey, here's our audience for the Blazer. Here's our audience for the Hummer. We want to build something for them." Fantastic. Now we know who they are. When you're building a business, you have to do that work and you have to make sure that whatever this app is doing is going to provide value and core value. So with General Motors, their core value is selling you a vehicle. I don't care how good the app is. I don't care what the app does. Their core value is selling you a vehicle. The app is an add-on. When you're building a business and you're utilizing the business or the app as part of your business, that is core. So you're going to need to do a lot more upfront research. You're not going to be handed that research. So I think that's really like core versus ancillary. I think
Mhm.
is a big differentiator.
So, Dan, if you had to start over tomorrow with zero resources, what would you do first?
I
Go
find
get
it.
a job?
Well, I find it. So I will say
I,
this.
I just put you in a tough position.
Nah,
You have starting over tomorrow. You have no resources.
uh,
What are you gonna do?
yeah, that's okay. Because you know what, it's. I think it would be the same thing I would do every single time. Um, I really like my co-founders. I didn't know them going into it, but we complement each other extremely well. Extremely well. We're all three. There's three in the business still. One left about a year in. So there's three of us that are still in the business. We still run the business with our extended leadership group. Um, and we still have meetings with just the three of us. And I think if I were to start something tomorrow, I would find somebody I can start it with. Because when it does get bad, it's really helpful to have someone to be miserable with. Misery loves
They said
company.
misery love, yeah, misery loves
Exactly.
company, right?
Exactly. So I honestly think that there is no way I would ever just start something myself. Right? I
Okay.
love to be able to have them there with me. I love to be able to bounce ideas off each other. I love to be able to argue and yell at each other because we do that. We'll yell and argue at each other still to this day, but then go get lunch because like we don't care, right? This is part of
Of
the
course.
process. And so I couldn't imagine starting anything without really good partners, and I'm very fortunate to have those two guys.
How do you keep your team aligned when working on complex problems or projects rather, with big clients?
Yeah, that's a great question. Typically, that happens within the actual project teams. So the way we're structured, this is kind of helpful to do this too. So we don't have we may have 6, 7 clients at a time, but it's not like project goes from development department to design department to QA department where they're all working on different clients at a time. We
Mhm.
do dedicated teams, dedicated cross-functional teams with clients. So Jimmy John's a great example. We're still partners with them. They have developers, they have designers, they have what we call delivery lead project management, and they have QA, and they're all one team. There's a group of I think 8 of them or so and they're dedicated to Jimmy John's. When they come in every day, they're only working on Jimmy John's. And so if you are dedicated, embedded in a brand, and you're in that small knit team, it's very easy to stay aligned. I think if
Mm.
we had a situation where everybody was on every project and it moved from one department to
Chaos.
another, it's exact chaos. There's no alignment. Jimmy John's is going to need something different than DT Energy, right? It's one of our other
Mhm.
clients. They're going to need something very different. And so
Right.
I think that is where that's what we do really well. is these dedicated, integrated, cross-functional teams. And then that helps build a relationship between team and brand. And that's part of the value of being onshore. Like that is what we offer at Detroit Labs that can't always be offered elsewhere.
Okay, I understand that. Dan, let's say we have a listener or a viewer. They want to they have something in the field of technology, but they live in Alabama. They live in Iowa. They live in a place that's not known for tech. What advice would you give an entrepreneur trying to innovate in cities not known for tech?
Well, it's challenging. I think you can. Well, first of all, we're all virtual, right? So I think in and of itself, you can connect with folks where it's kind of becoming more and more irrelevant on where you're at. Uh, we talked about earlier with the Silicon Valley thing. You're going to miss out on going to the bar and meeting somebody that's also doing a startup and bouncing ideas off of them. You'll miss out on that. But there's so many opportunities and ability to connect digitally now that I don't think location's as much of a hindrance. I think what what I might encourage folks to do is if you're interested in starting something up, right, and you're interested in doing something, even if it's technology, uh, draw some inspiration from where you are, right? So if you grew up in an area that is primarily farmland,
Mm-hmm.
innovate on something for the farming industry.
Right.
You may potentially know farming. You have a built-in audience that's around there. So you're doing technology, but you're doing it for an industry that you can look out your window and see. So, we do a lot of work with the automotive industry. We're in Detroit. We can look out
Right.
our door
Makes
and see
sense.
General Motors, right? Like, so we do a ton of work in the automotive industry, and we all come from car families. We know what we want inside of vehicles. So I think that as long as it's if you're middle America, do something for middle America.
Right.
If you really don't want to do that, like if you're middle America and you want to do something for the Pacific Ocean, you may want to move to the Pacific Ocean. Oh, sorry if it was out there.
So that's good advice. Make use of what's around you. I only got a few more questions. I'll let you go. I know you're a busy man, Dan. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I want to know a couple of things. How do you stay curious and continue learning as a leader? And what's the toughest decision you had to make as president of Detroit Labs?
All right. So the stay curious as a leader, I think is goes back to the failure piece. Each time, let yourself not know something, if that makes sense. Let yourself be wrong. Great example today. We're talking with a client about digital wallets, and like Starbucks, right? They carry a float. And, you prepay on your card, and so it's a feature somewhat like that. And I found myself in a 30-minute meeting with our team. We're trying to uncover something, and I'm in Chat GPT trying to figure out what banks actually hold float for folks in digital wallet. And like I went down a rabbit hole. I learned a ton in a 30-minute meeting with our folks. Like it was kind of like live learning with Chat GPT. And I found myself, that meeting I might have just been like, wow, you guys all go find this. But I was curious. I was like, hey,
Right.
I don't know anything about this industry. Let's do that. So I think that piece of it is allowing yourself to not know something, but then
Okay.
being curious enough to find it and give yourself outlets to find it. Like I said, AI is great for that. Hardest decision is, and this is a combined decision, I will say, between my other co-founders and our leadership team, is two different times over the last couple years we had to do layoffs, and that was
Yes.
an incredibly difficult decision, incredibly painful. We waited as long as we possibly could before we did it. Um, I think we did it as well as you could, as
Uh-huh.
respectfully as you could, but wow, that hurt. That really hurt. And so, I would say that was, we went 11 years without ever having to do it. 11 or
Mhm.
12 years without ever having to do
That's a great run.
it. Yeah. Well, that's my wife.
Especially
My wife
the
reminds me
economy.
of that.
Yeah, because the economy goes up and down. 11 years, that's pretty impressive. If you could go back and give your younger self advice, I know you've been asked this question a million times. What would it be, Dan? What would be that advice to your younger self?
Yeah, maybe a couple things. So I work with Central Michigan University and their entrepreneurship group, and one of the things that I'm asked that a lot. One of them is be more involved. So if there are social meetups, if there are events, go to them. Build your network, and through that process, hone your skills of communication and being fearless and being open to rejection. When we started the business, I was so nervous to go talk to clients. I was scared to talk to clients. It literally freaked me out. And I had someone tell me, like, hey, listen, you don't figure this out, you're not going to have a business. And so I was like, oh, it's a fair point. You have clients if you want to have a business. And so it was something I worked on, and I would encourage folks to work on that sooner, as soon as you can. Find different ways and techniques to be comfortable going and selling something to a client, going and pitching something, and try to find a little bit of a way to be as fearless as possible. So I wish I knew that early on. Than trying to figure it out throughout the way.
So what do you hope your legacy as an innovator will be for Detroit and beyond?
I think maybe some folks have big, broad statements. Mine's a little less. I just want to be known as having a company that people enjoy to work at. That we provided flexibility, hopefully a few dollars to folks, that'd be great, right?
Right.
Allowed them to, be there for their families, be there for their kids. I love telling folks that, I leave the office at 4:45 because I'm going to go hang out with my kids for a while. You can catch me later online. That's great. But like, I coach and my kids are in sports. I want to be there for them. So I rather my legacy, if you will, is being able to create an environment where all of that is possible, right? So many times with entrepreneurship, it's the focus on the grind, and you miss all of these opportunities with your family, with your friends. I think you can do it all. And so if looking back, I see that I've helped to create a business in an environment that people want to be at, and they were still able to see their kids go to their activities. We still did great work for our clients, and everyone did well financially. That is a legacy for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Once again, Dan, thank you for coming on our show. This is a great conversation.
Appreciate you.
That was my last question. What's that, Dan? Go ahead.
Appreciate you having me.
It's been a good time. Now, to our audience, this was an insightful conversation with Dan Ward, co-founder and president of Detroit Labs. His journey reminds us that innovation isn't tied to geography. It's tied to mindset. It's tied to resilience. It's tied to the courage to solve real problems for real people. In today's episode, if it struck a chord with you, let us know by subscribing. Please share this podcast. Share this YouTube episode. Please rate this podcast as well, because your feedback helps us bring even more stories like Dan's to light. And as always, keep innovating, keep creating, and never stop unveiling your inner innovator. Until next time, I'm your host, A.D. Edwards, signing off.
You've been listening to Ingleside Reviews, Innovators Unveiled. Our passion is to take you on a journey into the minds behind the most cutting-edge products hitting the market today. It's an honor to have on the show the creative geniuses shaping our future. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. Hit our website at inglesidereviews.com. On Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Ingleside Reviews. And on Twitter at Ingleside Review. See you next time.